Today is the first day of Black History Month, and we have a remarkable guest that we have to my left that will be speaking to us. I met this gentleman a few months back, and when I started talking to him, all I could do was say, wow, wow, and wow. This gentleman, for those, he said his family are direct descendants of Martha Washington, George Washington's president, the first president. And another thing I did not know was that Martha Washington was married before she married George Washington. And so this gentleman's family are direct descendants. And when you listen to his story, and when he tells you the amazing history of the Syphax family, I'm just honored that we have him here. Ladies and gentlemen, Rotary Club members, Craig Syphax.
Hello, everyone. I am Craig Syphax, and I am from the Arlington Black Heritage Museum of Arlington. That is on Columbia Pike in Arlington. But today I'm here to speak about the Syphax family. I am one of the members. Today I'm gonna begin with just the family at Arlington House, where the Arlington Cemetery is, and the house was formerly called Robert E. Lee Memorial. At that house, there was Charles Syphax and Mariah Syphax. Mariah Syphax was the illegitimate child of George Washington Parke Custis. He is the individual that bought the property where Arlington Cemetery is and developed it as his property. Robert E. Lee came to that property because he married George Washington Parke Custis's oldest daughter, Mary. And Mary's youngest daughter was Mariah, and her name was Mariah Parke Custis until she married Charles Syphax. Charles Syphax was he was the right-hand man to George Washington Parke Custis. He was a slave, he was a Black man, he rode a horse, he had a gun, and his duties were to inflict the punishment to the other slaves, tell the slaves what their duties were, and at one point, after retrocession, he was the one so that when you brought your boat up to Virginia, on the Virginia side, to bring your wares and sell your things, you had to pay a tax. And he was responsible for gathering the money and returning it. So he was a very trustworthy kind of individual. He was so trustworthy that George Washington Parke Custis allowed him to get married in the house. And that was something that your slave master, you had to really be really tight with him to be able to do that. So he allowed his illegitimate daughter to marry his #1 servant in the house. 10 years later, Robert E. Lee got married in the house to his oldest daughter. When George Washington Parke Custis died, he had a will. In his will, he left 17 acres of the Arlington Cemetery property to his illegitimate daughter, Mariah Syphax. The Union soldiers came in and said that we will not honor his will at that point to give it to her. What we will do is make this land something called Freedmen's Village. And that was a place where the slaves after emancipation were standing around like, what do we do now? After they celebrated, they realized that all of the jobs were in Washington. So they migrated from the South all the way to DC. And as they were coming to DC, they realized there was a civil war going on. So as they were coming up to the war, the Union recognized what was going on, and they told them, well, first, let me tell you, when you were a slave and you were bought, you didn't have, you were naked. So your owner gave you, if you were a man or a boy, you got a pair of pants and a shirt. If you were a female, you got a dress. So as the Union soldiers noticed what was happening, that these people were going to DC to where the jobs were to build the government buildings and the Washington Monument and things of that sort, they stopped them and told them, we will give you 3 hot meals a day. We will give you clothes if you come and fight with us against the Confederates. So that wasn't enough to make them want to fight. The clincher was when they said, we will provide you boots, shoes. They never had shoes. So they were like, boots. So now this was a whole nother way of life for them. So they immediately went and said yes, but they forgot the small print that they would be on the front line. So that happened. And so the ones that didn't kept on coming to DC. When they got to DC, there was an outbreak of cholera. That is a stomach disease that causes you things. Since you're eating, I won't describe everything. So there was a stomach disease, and forgot the general's name, but general in charge of the Union soldiers went to the American Medical Association, which was the predatory to the American Red Cross today. He went to them and asked them, how do we combat this? They said, we need to quarantine all of these sick people into one area. And so he decided that he was going to take the 17 acres that was inherited to Mariah Syphax and make this place, excuse me, Freedmen's Village. Freedmen's Village was a place that taught the former slaves now, taught them how to count their money, how to work, what they needed to do in America. It had its own mess hall. It had 3 churches on it. It had a senior citizens home, a post office, a market, and it also had just places for socializing. So they left there out of the training that they got and went out into the other plantations to work and come back. In 1900, they disbanded Freedmen's Village because they said that we're building graves in this direction, and so you all have to disperse. When they dispersed, they left with the 3 churches that were in Freedmen's Village, and that created the Black neighborhoods in Arlington County. They all went into South Arlington. As Freedmen's Village disbanded, there were some notable people at Freedmen's Village. There was Sojourner Truth. She taught in the schools, and the school curriculum was done by William Syphax, one of Charles and Mariah's 10 children, their first son, but second child. William Syphax was quite a guy in this area. He lived in Southwest DC, between M Street, South Capitol Street, Fort McNair, and the water. Forgot what the water's called. Bird, I forgot. Okay, so it's in that area over by the baseball stadium. That's called the Syphax area. Buzzard Point, that's it. That is the Syphax area of DC. There is a Syphax school, Syphax post office, and Syphax Gardens row house. That's a DC public housing. It is called the Syphax area because 3 Syphaxes owned all of that property back in the early 1900s. William Syphax, Ennis Syphax, and Robert Syphax. William Syphax ended up being the superintendent. It wasn't called superintendent. He was the president of the Board of Supervisors for colored schools in Washington, D.C. and Georgetown. Out of that position, he started a school for colored kids. And it was located where Dunbar High School is today. If you walk into Dunbar High School, there is a mural bigger than the wall right here of William Syphax and one of his sayings. So the school that he started is now Dunbar High School. There was John B. Syphax, another Syphax, and that is the lineage that I am directly up under. John B. was a Virginia delegate at one time. He also, when Mariah Syphax, at the time that they took her property, John Syphax went to Congress and created a bill for the relief of Mariah Syphax to get her property back. She got her property back. Andrew Jackson, the president at the time, gave her, well, he's the one that signed off on it and said that we will give her her property back, which is on Arlington Cemetery. He said we will give her her property back and we will give her $20,000 back then in relief. So the money never came off the books. She never received any money, but she got her property back and they lived there until the Navy Annex came. If you know where the Navy Annex is. So it was on Columbia Pike. They had that strip right there. If you know where Henderson Hall is, it went that far back. It's back far as Henderson Hall and down Columbia Pike. Another Syphax we can speak of would be my mother, Evelyn Reed Syphax from Lynchburg, Virginia, who at one time was the superintendent of schools in Arlington. She has a building named after her in Arlington. It is the Syphax Education Center, where the school board meets and has all their offices and administration. There was another Syphax, my uncle, William Syphax, William T. He developed a lot of Northern Virginia. After the war, he built houses for colored people that were affordable and things like that. But another thing I wanted to mention is that when Freedman Village was disbanded and they created the Black neighborhoods in Arlington, a lot of them went to where the Pentagon is, and it was a refugee camp. It was a tent camp. And they didn't move them from there until they said, we are about to build the Pentagon and you have to go somewhere else now. And those people mainly went to DC. And that created a lot of what Southeast is today. Some more I can tell you was William T. Syphax, who was my uncle, who passed like 10 years ago. He had Syphax Steel. And at one time during the 70s, he was the richest Black man in America. He owned Syphax Steel. He had a construction company. He also had a boat, cargo ship that he brought products in, but they were all for colored people mainly, that he was specifically focused on. His wife, Marguerite Syphax, my aunt, she was very community-minded. She ended up taking over the business after he passed, and then she took it to a next level and expanded to Philadelphia. So it got real big, and right now her son Jeffrey is running that company. Let's see, and then Craig Syphax was born 1962. Let's see, what have I done? I have started the museum that my mother's vision was in Arlington. I started the museum, and it is now not quite brick and mortar, but we have a location on Columbia Pike, and it's a temporary location because we will be moving into the Amazon building once they finish, and we will be in there on the first floor. Let's see, I had a paint company, which was real prominent. I didn't paint this building, but I painted a lot of stuff in Arlington. Let's see, I also sold real estate, and I am now a TV and film producer in Arlington County. Let's see, next I will say, let's talk more about Freedman's Village. At Freedman's Village, when Freedman's Village started in 1865, December, emancipation was April 1865. So they started in December. Well, that was when the ribbon cutting was December 1865 to December 1900. It disbanded. The three churches that came out of it were Lomax AME Church, Mount Zion Baptist Church, and my church, Mount Olive Baptist Church. All three of these churches are still standing. And when the people moved from Freedman's Village, they built their house around where the church moved to. So you all stayed with your kind of group kind of thing and moved like that. And the people on the north side of Arlington didn't know anyone on the south side of Arlington because you had to have a vehicle or a horse and buggy back then. And so they didn't travel that far. They just stayed local and, you know, with themselves. Let's see, who else can I talk about? Today there is Scott Syphax. He is in California. He is in Sacramento area. He is a news anchor on the TV station there. And he also has a technology company that he runs. So there are a lot of prominent Syphaxes around that you don't know because we operate by nicknames a lot. That's something different. So we don't exactly stand out, you know, and put our name out. We'll put somebody else out there in front and use our nickname. Anyone with a question? What you got?
What do you hope to have at the museum? What kinds of?
Presently, what we have at the museum are artifacts from Arlington and DC and Alexandria. That's our main focus, those areas, and the early 1800s and the whole 1800 period and up until like the segregation and things of that sort is mainly what we focus on. Yes?
Thank you very much. You've told a compelling story about the preservation of memory, which is what a museum is for, preservation. But it also seems to me that it's a story about erasure of memory as Freedom's Village is cleared, as the schools are cleared. And so in a day when people look at the beating to death of a young man as an anomaly, or a black man as an anomaly, or surprise, as though there's not a continuing history behind that, perhaps you could say a little bit more about how challenging it is to combat the erasure of memory as you seek to preserve memory.
Okay, that's a mouthful of a question here for me. I try and stay out of the present day politics, but to answer your question, we don't take on things that defund the police and things like that. We don't endorse things of that sort either, but I would say that the town of Memphis should keep that alive in their museum, but that's not our focus on what we do. A lot of our stuff is slavery and the demeaning of slavery, and that is the extent of negativity that we show at our museum. And we don't intend to be any more negative than that. We do the sit-ins and things like that. And we have Joan Mulholland on our board, who is an actual freedom fighter. And she is a white woman. Yes.
Yes. It occurred to me, I hadn't heard of your museum and work, but I have heard of the African American Museum that's on the mall. Why why wouldn't you merge with them to get a bigger presence and opportunity for more people to find out about this? I'm hearing it for the first time, and I've lived here in DC for 25 years.
Thank you for bringing that up. We were online since 1985, and we didn't have a physical structure where you could come to us until like it was like 2010. Did we have something in Arlington where you could come to us and walk around? The African American Museum in DC has a Syphax exhibit on the second floor behind the glass doors, which I personally helped them to develop. So we do work with the Smithsonian and that building, but that is not their job to advertise for us. We help them with the genealogy aspect of what's going on at the museum. And we will be putting ourselves out more with documentaries.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming to our meeting today. I wanted to ask you about bridges. It's about 100 years since Key Bridge was built. Prior to Key Bridge, I don't believe any of the active bridges here were built, maybe the Long Bridge over with the train. So there was a bridge to Georgetown, and the Virginians were kind of encumbered by the Resident Act, which took away a lot of funds for that side of the river. Could you comment, or do you have any stories or anecdotes about building bridges, or about how the lack of bridges encumbered Virginians or your family back in the day?
That's another good question. The bridge you're thinking of is called the Aqueduct?
Yes.
The Aqueduct? Okay.
Yes.
So the Aqueduct Bridge was the house that is the aqueduct is still there at the lower end of Key Bridge on the Georgetown side. And as for bridges, the Long Bridge was the only way to get back and forth to DC and Virginia during the retrocession time. So that was your best bet into getting into DC. There was also the building of the Teddy Roosevelt Bridge at that time, but it wasn't completed until around 1920 something. So before then, you only had the Long Bridge if you were going into DC or coming from DC back.
What's the Long Bridge?
Or by boat. The Long Bridge. The Long Bridge is another story. The Long Bridge is the bridge that's where 14th Street is now. So before 14th Street, it was a military only, you could only be in the military to go back and forth across it. And it was only military machinery and supplies going back and forth. So they called it the Long Bridge because of its length. That's the best I can do on it.
Hello, Craig. Thank you so much for your fantastic presentation and for bringing a new or maybe an underestimated perspective on history to us. My question to you is that, is there any book to which you can point us on the history of the Syphax family? Something that can be shared with the new generation and something that we can read ourselves as a companion to visiting the museum and having more conversations on those issues?
Thank you for that question. Yes, there is. I have completed a 26-minute documentary that I gave out to the family because in 2009, we had a family reunion. And at the family reunion, the West had a different story. The East is the only story I knew. The South had a story and the North had a story. So I said, this can't be. Everybody has a little different variation of the Syphax story. So I did the research with the Park Service and all kind of people and historians. And I made a 26-minute film that I gave out freely to the family so that we could all be on the same accord. I plan on putting that out to the public real soon, probably this summer in some form. And I will probably extend it to be something that someone else outside of the family can enjoy as well. So as for a book, the books, I would say, there are a few books. I can't think of the name. So one of them is called Our People, and it's about DC's prominent Black families. That's one book. Another book would be, doesn't come to mind right now, but there are some books if you Google Syphax.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Cohen, and I'm very happy that you're here on this Black History First Day. However, there were a few little things that I wanted to ask you about with telling your story. When you told your story, you used the word color quite often, and I realized that that was the color, that was what Black people were called at the time. But when you tell the story, as we do when we speak of enslaved people who were enslaved at one point, we don't call them what they were. Or when we talk about slave owners, we don't call them what they were called. We called them, people who enslaved people, Do you think that it would be proper or more proper that when you speak to groups like this in white spaces to use maybe a different language? And then the other thing I wanted to address just simply is that when we are, I know how important it is to tell your story about the Syphaxes and how the connection was with George Washington and so forth and so on, and I appreciate that. But as you keep alive your legacy, there are people David was just talking about, and I understand that you don't get involved with politics, but I think that there is a level of respect that has to be paid to that. And would you possibly think that in the future it might be of the interest of your legacy to keep that going and to possibly speak on, not to be politically incorrect, but to possibly address those issues? Because to be quite honest, if we aren't paying attention to things like that, why would it be important to pay attention to your legacy? You are a Black man.
Okay, for your first question, yeah, I use the term colored people when I'm speaking during that period. When I'm speaking in the 1800 period or something like that, I say colored because that was the terminology of the day. And if I change it up, then I'm not speaking in the proper, tone or area of talk. But my normal is to say Black. I don't say African American. I say Black because we are Black. All right. The second question is how does the legacy stay?
Yeah, how do you feel like you can continue speaking about your legacy? And I agree that it should be told, and I love your story. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, not address what is actually going on out here today with young Black men and women, and Black women being listened and Black men being killed every day. And speaking with pride on your legacy. And the fact is this: if you don't do it, there may be a moment when you are silenced.
All right. We know that our history is being silenced every now and then. We know that. So for me, well, yes, for me as an individual, I speak on the family as much as I can to get the word out. And of course, during Black History Month, I am speaking on a number of topics. My family is like in the back, but they want to know other topics on Black history. For today's society, we don't go to that. emphasize on the memories of the past. At our museum, we focus on the past more than we do what's happening now. And we don't get into the forefront of things going on right now. We have programs at the museum where kids come and learn Black history and things of that sort, but we always keep it as positive as possible. Even as you can, as positive as you can keep it to be. And we try and make it as bright as possible, you know, so because if you're a kid, you have your emotions are stronger and you feel different. So we talk a little gingerly to them about it.
All right, I'll make this brief. This is real Black history in my backyard. I'm born and raised here in DC, and I've never heard this topic matter, particularly with Syphax community. For those of you Rotarians that don't know Washington well enough, where that Syphax place is known as projects. And I used to service those kids for Christmas time and Thanksgiving time. And I knew nothing more of that neighborhood than it being full of people in projects, Black in particular, or African-American or colored, whatever you want to call them, because we seem to get a name every 20 years or 10 years. But nonetheless, Mr. Syphax, I made it my imperative to be at this one because I've missed quite a few of my luncheons, but this one meant a lot because I have a dear friend who I brought to Rotary more than once named John Hopkins. And he gave me some insight on your family. And just now before you got on, I had told my wife that you guys used to be where the Pentagon was. Now that's me casually speaking, but you cleared it up where you started from the Arlington Cemetery. And I just want to thank you for bringing some real Black history in our backyard, which I wish our kids would know that Syphax is just not a place of poverty. I wish they'd known that folks owned land over there before they lost access to it. I work today with even my fellow Rotarians to make sure that doesn't happen to my family's land. But thank you for starting February 1st off on something that's in our backyard that many of our kids don't have a clue.
Last question here.
Okay. Greg, thank you so very much. I agree with Donnie that the history that you gave us today, I really didn't know until I met you. And this is what Black History Month is about. But my question is kind of similar. I was really going to ask what Lisa asked, but I want to add on to that. Recently, I found out, for example, and I told you all some of this, I went 70 years without knowing the fact until I took 23andMe. And when I took 23andMe, I had to check it with the other one. I had to make sure. And I found out I was 46% white. I had no idea. 7 years of my life, I had no idea. But the point I want to make, and to you, Craig, as well, when you come from white heritage like that, and let's say I got white heritage, automatically we have to address ourselves as Black. No matter if we got 75% white, we have to address ourselves as Black. And I want to ask you, what did you think about that and about that concept?
Well, I'm pretty close to that concept since I'm akin to George Washington kind of thing. That concept is something that we can't get away from because it was the slave owners taking liberties on what they wanted. So I'm just saying that there is a lot of intermixing that was going on back then, and nothing you can say about it. Nothing, you can't get away from that.
Oh, you could stay up here. On behalf of the club, I am pleased and proud to present you with this certificate signifying our commitment to plant a tree in your honor to improve and beautify the environment. And we'll send you the link so you could check on GPS exactly where your tree is. Thank you for coming.